Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Friday, which means it's time for a new How to Bass tutorial. And today, I'm going to show you how to make this sound. This is actually the first piece of sound design I've done that's been purely digital in like an entire week. It's been weird. It's been real weird. Anyway, this is what's going on. This looks a little complicated, and it looks like a lot of automation clips, but it's actually really not that dense. Let's break this out. Let's break this down into spaces here. So these three are the first three band passes that you saw grouped up there. This is, I'm pretty sure that's just one thing. Yeah, then it's the next band pass. And then there's a high pass, low pass, and then band pass, peak. So that's that, band pass, high pass, low pass, band pass, peak. All right. Now we're separating it into the little groups here just so we can visually differentiate which ones are supposed to be what, because it may have looked intimidating, but it really wasn't that deep. Anyway, this began with an idea of that I wanted to make a sound that was smoother than my usual kinds of these basses, but I didn't want to have it be like the pure square wave perfect smoothness. So I added a little bit of harmonic uncertainty, and I did that by creating a square wave and then right-clicking convert shapes to harmonics and then randomizing the phases. You can see we have this square side eventually and then randomized phases. I did something a little bit different, however, because you can see these aren't pure sine waves. This is not all the way down as it would be if it were a sine wave. Now, the thing that happens in here with the harmonics is that when you add a new harmonic, it adds a harmonic of that waveform. I have hiccups. Oh my God. And those harmonics are going to be harmonics of that waveform, but they actually do have more harmonics than that. So, for example, if I do this shape with a triangle wave, and then if I made it a sine harmonics, this is the actual harmonic content that's being created. So if I did that for this is actually creating a very interesting harmonic series. Created that. It's not just a square wave harmonics anymore. So I did that for this guy, but you can see it's panned. That's because I cloned it, and I panned it this way, and I just basically did the same thing, but I randomized it again, so that it's a different set of randomized phases, and so it creates a stereo image. This guy also has a third oscillator that is just a square wave all the way up at number 10 here, which is creating that kind of harmony going on up there. You kind of hear that it does it a little bit by itself anyway. That's because of the positions of particular filters at particular times that accentuate particular harmonics and make it sound like it has that harmony, but not did that on purpose. And then this is just a sub coming out. I could have not had that happening, but I just cloned it anyway. I put a sub out, and it's going to various places that needed sub reinforcement. So these first three guys are parallel bandpass filters. This is achieving essentially what I would normally do with notches, but just in just somewhat of a different way. And this is mostly just to see what it would do. Jury's out on how well that was actually worthwhile, but yeah. And then there's a bandpass on top of all this. Now, the important part about this is that normally, before I even do this, I usually am distorting things. I usually distort the source signal, and then I do the filtering. At this point, I decided to do the filtering first, and then saturate it, and then do more filtering, just to see if there would be a bit of a difference. And given that my goal here was to preserve smoothness, I think that it actually did a little bit. Then it's being compressed. You see the low band is actually muted, and this is where I'm putting the sub back into the wave shaper over there. The mid, however, is going down far enough that we are getting some of the lower end harmonics, which causes that gurgliness in the sound, versus just clean, straight up distortion. And this is a low pass filter, and this is a high pass filter, and again, in parallel, and the purpose of this is so that we can do sort of oppositeness. Because normally you can do a high pass, low pass together, and then you get kind of like a very specific band pass that you can move around. But then if you go all the way around, instead of having a band pass, you have essentially a notch, the opposite of that. And that's what I want to achieve here, where they do overlap every once in a while. You can also see there's like some EQing. I basically EQ out to 200 hertz. I guess not in that one. And then this one too, yeah. Not like out, but like accentuated a little bit because it was a bit muddy. And then the final Maximus is doing some interesting things. I essentially wanted to experiment with multiband distortion. Now you might be thinking, well, this is a multiband compressor. But if you go into the compressor section and you turn off all the time variables, it will activate the compression curve instantaneously, which is essentially what distortion does. And this interface is more or less exactly what the wave shaper interface is, and thus multiband wave shaping, and also compression. So high frequency distortion, mid frequency distortion, specific mid frequency angle. This is picking it up where I wanted to go. And there weren't that many high frequencies to begin with, so that I had to push it really hard. That's why I also brought that in post, because I brought it up a lot. But that kind of sharpness on the high frequencies is coming from the fact that I'm distorting the high frequencies. Go figure. And yeah, that's pretty much this sound. A whole lot of filtering, some distortion, and it's mostly still just, filters and distortion, which is some things I've been doing for quite a while. But I wanted to just see if some aspects of something could be different, like, high passing before distortion, multiple different kinds of filter configurations, high pass, low pass, opposite this to create the notch, and then also high frequency distortion. These are things that I don't do a lot of. So putting it all together does actually kind of create a sound that, while still, neuro-y like that I do, is a bit different than it could be. And cool fact, I use the square wave for this higher harmonic, because watch what happens when I use a saw wave. Despite not being a bass tone, it does bring back the bass toothiness that you would have gotten if I totally did just make a bass tone out of it. Just wanted to show that just because, and just, give you an idea of some things you can do to experiment, to take the sound and expand in places that you might like better. Anyway, this FLP will be available to download in the description of this video. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and as usual, have a nice day. I really hope I had the right mic on for this video.